Welcome back. I was reading the question from Madison, who asked if an electric guitar could send this type of signal. I'm assuming you mean the control voltage. So I was looking up, unfortunately, I do not play guitar, but I was looking up the anatomy of how it's actually set up. And it looks like the vibration from the strings is converted to an electrical signal by the pickup. So there's a couple different ways that you could do it. So if the goal is basically to directly visualize or basically access what that instrument is doing so that you can visualize it. There's a couple different ways that you can do it because it looks, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I did have to look up how a electric guitar works. So basically the electric guitar goes directly to the amplifier. So it's not going through an audio device. It's basically obviously using the amplifier directly to create the sound. So if you are going through an audio interface, then you could then use the audio interface directly into TouchDesigner, which we'll take a look at. If you're working with the vibrations directly, then right at the point where it converts the vibration into the electrical signal, I would imagine that there's a way to basically hijack that. It would be pretty, because before it becomes sound, it has to go through the amplifier. So the electrical signal is going to be fairly weak. So turning that into another signal that you could bring into TouchDesigner, there's a couple different ways that you could do it, but if you can plug your guitar into an audio interface and then get the audio from it, that might be the easiest way to do it. There's also, I don't know if you guys have heard of basically piezo mics, which works the same way as it detects vibration in a surface and it converts that exactly like the pickup's doing. So if you get the vibration and then convert that to the audio, there, I would imagine that there's a way, there's probably a device, I didn't get time to look it up over the break, but I would imagine that there's a device that could basically hijack right at the point where the vibration is converted into sound, and then figuring out the best way, depending on your overall setup, figuring out the best way to connect that to however you're visualizing. So whether you're going directly into TouchDesigner, for example, like we're gonna look at, would be the next step is figuring out that connection point. So that was kind of a quick right on the break looking into that. And then if I get a chance to answer that a little bit more further, then I will do so. But thank you for the question. And I hope so far that information was a little bit helpful. So there's a couple ways to approach it, but if you're not going through an audio interface, it might be a little bit more roundabout and creative, but the creative part is half the fun. So all right, so now we are going to jump into TouchDesigner, and hopefully everybody has, oh, you're welcome. Hopefully everybody has TouchDesigner installed. If not, then you can, of course, follow along, and you have the recording that you can go back and watch later at your own leisure. We are very much switching gears. So the first part was all about presentation and sitting back and exploring ideas. This one we are jumping into TouchDesigner and doing a walkthrough of how to analyze. Oh, I don't need that on screen. Sorry. Walkthrough of how to analyze the sound and how to import different audio files and work with audio device. And so we're going to be doing step-by-step walkthrough of that. There are several people, which I'm excited about, in the workshop who are new to TouchDesigner. So this is going to be beginner friendly. And so I will explain what we're doing. And you guys should hopefully all have the file that came with the workshop link. If not, I know he posts, yeah. Oh no, I'm not sharing my screen. Am I not sharing my screen? No, okay, thank you.
Sorry, Ginger. Yeah,
no, it's okay.
It was my screen.
Yeah, thank you for letting me know. Yes, I will share that. Share audio screen too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. So yeah, we're going to be going through this file that should have been a download link. So if you guys don't have it, I don't know if you want to post one more time in the chat, but I think everybody has it. So I'll go ahead and go through and start diving into this. Okay, so as I mentioned, if you're brand new to TouchDesigner, we are going to walk through this, and so never fear. I'm always open to converting newcomers to TouchDesigner because I've been using it for probably, I've lost track, I think about 3 years now, but once I switched over to using TouchDesigner, I pretty much started using it for everything that I was doing, from interactivity to doing the audio visual stuff to doing generative real-time visual stuff. And as I mentioned before, the thing that I love about it is that it is real-time. But I think my favorite thing about it is that it's extremely versatile. And so there is a lot to TouchDesigner. And if you're brand new to it, please don't be overwhelmed at first, because there is a lot to it, but that just means that it's also extremely versatile. So you can build pretty much anything you could ever dream of within TouchDesigner, because you have basically several building. Yes, can someone post the download link in the group chat? Thank you. So basically, you have several building blocks, and through the use of all these building blocks, you're assembling these tools that you can use to then create much bigger things. So that's what I love about TouchDesigner is you don't have a lot of pre-made things per se. There are some things that are pre-made that are really easy to use, but it's a set of several different building blocks that you can assemble in infinite number of ways to create all these different tools. So what I've given you is essentially some pre-made tools that are going to be super helpful, because I think it's always nice when you're doing a workshop and you're walking through stuff. You know, sometimes it can be really easy to get lost if you're trying to follow along and do exactly what the instructor is doing, and then you lose your place and then you're kind of stuck. So I wanted to go ahead and give you guys the final file of what we're going to be walking through and creating, so you don't have to worry about if you do get lost, then you know you're stuck at that point. So if you're new to TouchDesigner, what we're looking at here is the interface that we're going to be working with. So these ones in blue that I've turned blue for you, they don't come blue, but I've turned them blue for easy navigating, are essentially containers. So they're what's called a base, but it's a container for the network to organize stuff. So what we're going to do is start with the audio source. Essentially looking at the overview first, breaking down the general process that we're going to be looking at for visualizing audio. We're going to start with bringing in our audio source, and then we're going to analyze the audio. The visual analysis is essentially visualizing the data in different ways. So that's not like the final visuals, that's just creative ways of seeing what the data is about the sound. So that's kind of like a bonus tools. And then control input, which hopefully we should have time for, is starting to get into talking about additional ways of doing interactive control. And so not just driving the visuals automatically based on the sound, but being able to combine the audio reactive elements with the interactive control, so you can actually make decisions, you know, while the audio is doing its thing and controlling certain things. And you can also come in and control certain things like different triggers and things, and cause different things to happen at different points in the music. So basically like a real-time creative process, so everything's not already done for you. So the first thing we're going to start with is we're going to, and I'm using, hopefully everybody is using a 3-button mouse or a wheel mouse. So basically I'm using the wheel to zoom in and out of the network. And I'm going to double click on the audio source to jump inside of that. And this is a little, you guys don't have that one, so ignore that one's there. That's a little thing for later. So again, using the wheel mouse to zoom in. So in TouchDesigner, there's different ways of setting up your operators. So basically, oops, I'm gonna, if you go off to the side here and double click, as I mentioned, all of these I've kind of pre-made for you so that we can walk through them easily. But if you go off to the side and double click, it's going to pull up this op create dialog. And so you'll notice that there's different colors. And so we're just going to do a very quick intro to TouchDesigner before we start walking through this. So when you double click, there's different operator families. And so the comp is basically UI elements and things like our geometry, which we'll get into, buttons, setting up the bases. These are all components. The tops, so if you click on the top, the tab next to it, the purple family is all texture operators. So these are having to do with you know, different textures, like circles, and working with images, video files, things like that. So basically working we'll simplify and say basically it's like working with different images of sorts. Go to the chops, and the chops is channel data. So this is basically working with signals. So this is where we're going to be working with audio, because audio is a signal. And so chops are our channel data family. SOPs is surface operators. So this is working more with 3D geometry and different effects that go with that. Material. So if you come from a 3D modeling background, these are our materials. DATS is starting to get into working more with tables and other data. So different from chops. So this is signals, whereas DATS is starting to work with scripts and other tables and things like that, which we're not going to be working with today. And then custom, we're not going to worry about today. So we're going to get into this part where we're actually creating stuff in just a moment, but I'm going to start with doing a walkthrough. And we're going to kind of recreate this, but also do a walkthrough. So if you get lost, don't worry. As I mentioned, it's already built for you here. So in TouchDesigner, there's essentially two main ways of working with audio. The first one that we're going to work with is bringing in an audio file. And so if you want to just practice doing this, so I'm going to put this down here. The way that you create it is just double click and it's going to bring this up. And each one has a name. So this is the audio file in. So we can click audio file in. Okay, so that's how you create an operator. So if we walk through this, the audio file in, the main property that we're interested in is where the file itself is located. Would it be possible to increase your font on the screen? No worries. If it's going, oh yes, I think so. Or if I zoom in, I think we'll go like that. Sorry, I know that I've been zooming out a lot, but we'll stay nice and big and hopefully that can help. So with the audio file in, the main thing that we're looking at is the file location. For this, we're going to be using the default file that comes with TouchDesigner, which is this lovely, you don't have to do this. I'm going to jump out for a second and turn this up so you guys can hear it. So this is the default audio file that comes with TouchDesigner. Some of you guys probably dream about this at night if you work with TouchDesigner a lot, because it is one of those things that gets stuck in your head. So that's the default audio. Yeah, that's playing in the background here, that's being visualized. If you would like to change it, please be my guest. So if you go to File, and let's say that you have your own song that you would like to load, you can just click on the plus sign, and then let's say that I want this one here, terribly named _ full late night industrial glitch wave. Great naming scheme, so I can import that one there. And then it's going to, of course, update the audio file. Do we have a lot of musicians, by the way? Yeah, Jeremy Cofield, classic. Do we have a lot of musicians in the chat? I'm going to keep talking, but I'm curious to see. So we can load our audio file. We're not going to change any of the parameters for this. The audio file, luckily, it's pretty much just really easy loaded in, and you don't need to change any of the parameters. No, that was pretty good. And then the other, so we have the audio file in. The other that you might be working with is the audio device in. So if you have anything like a audio interface, or you're working with a microphone, or like the microphone on your computer, any of those, you're going to be using the audio device in. And so these are purple. This is kind of start to get a little bit more advanced than we need to worry about right now. But I wanted to show you something really cool. So the reason that they're purple is because by default, if I add an audio device in, okay, so by default, you can see that they're white, and you can use the drop downs to choose your audio device. So let's say that you have your microphone, or whatever you want to set it to. If you do have your audio interface plugged in, you can choose it there, but they're set to white. Because I've already set this up for you guys, and I wanted to simplify it so that you guys can go back and work with it very easily. If you either press U or kind of use your mouse button to zoom out. So if you go way out, then it's going to go up a level. So we're inside here, double click, and now I'm outside of that level. On this level, I didn't mean to click on that. What I've done is I've gone ahead and set up a custom tab. So right now, think of this as like a container. And on that container, I've added a easy access for all the parameters that we're going to be changing. So here you can click on that and change the audio file to whatever you want to do. And then you can also change the input driver and all those things. So these are the parameters that we're going to be working with in this entire thing and changing. They're the main ones that we're focusing on, but I just made them easy access. So when you're on this upper level, you can go ahead and change them there. So this is my output volume. That's the one that I just changed it to. And then the analysis gain. And then you can change the input driver. And this is all the output stuff. Okay. So we'll get into that more in just a second, but just if you are trying to like navigate the network and try and figure out what you need to change, easy access, it's been put on this upper level so that you can access it easier. I was trying to change an Oscilloscope device from that custom pane, but it didn't have any luck. I was able to get it working going into the component. It might have broken. I did try and make it easier for you guys if you change it, and I will test it. So thank you for letting me know. So input driver, thank you. Yeah, it should hopefully, because it's bound to it, but it might. Didn't get a chance to test this by sending the file to somebody else. So if this is broken, I apologize. I'll check into that over the break. But we'll dive into this and I'll explain which ones we're changing also. So if you have an audio file, this is how you would load that there. If you want to do your audio device, then you would change it there. Switches are pretty commonly used in TouchDesigner, and we're going to be using them throughout this whole process. So as you can see, these are both feeding into, and I'm going to disconnect it just to show the new people how we do this. So every operator has an output, so you can just click and drag. So that's how these are connected. And both of these are feeding into the switch. And so with the switch, what you can do is just change the index, and it's basically going to switch between which input is coming in. And so as I mentioned, this is pretty much ideally set up so it's ready for you as a tool that no matter what audio you're working with, you can just open this file and then load whatever audio you're working with. And then if you need to switch it to the audio device, you can switch it to input 1, and you can see it's going to pull from here. And then if you need to switch it back to audio file in, then you can switch it back to input 0. It is, of course, a 0-based index system. So that's why input 1 is actually index 0. After that, we just have the volume. And hopefully that one's working on the upper level. It is on my end. So the volume is basically, once we get to the part where we're analyzing stuff, you can do the volume higher or lower. And this is basically, this first volume is affecting what we're going to be analyzing. So if you have a really weak signal, then you can boost the volume, and that will basically increase the signal so you have a stronger signal that you can work with for the analysis. We'll follow this thread and then I'll show you what we're doing below. The null. TouchDesigner, it's always great to add a null at the end of your network. Technically, this goes into an out, but the reason that you add a null is because if we wanted to change something in this whole string of things, so basically we're creating a network here. If I wanted to add something here, I'll just go ahead and add we'll do it here. Add another math just to show you what we're doing. So if I add a math, then it makes it really easy if I have the null at the end so that I don't have to reconnect everything back up. Because if I didn't have the null, then I'd need to undo this and then reconnect it in the network, and it just makes it easier to have that continuity. Okay, I'll go ahead and delete that. And so what this is doing here, this is going to be our audio analysis. So basically in this whole stage, we're just bringing in the audio file. This split off here, what we're doing is this is going to be our audio out. So this is how we actually hear the sound. And I did set up, so we have volume and, oh, I meant to call this one. If you want, this will be a good exercise. Instead of math 1, oh, it might break the one up. Okay, we'll leave it math 1 because since it's bound to the upper one, I think it's going to break it if I change it. But this is basically going to be our volume for our audio device out. So our audio device out, if it's broken on the top level, which I apologize for, I'll check that on the break. Audio device out is where we choose our speakers that we can hear the sound through. So if you click on audio device, and then you can choose your driver, and then you can choose your device that you want to hear it through. I'm going to change mine back to default. Okay, so that's your method. And if you don't hear it, then you can, I do have it linked to the upper level for the volume. So for mine, if I go to the upper level and I change the output volume, then it increases on mine. If your volume doesn't work, please let me know and I will look into that. Or if it does work, give me a thumbs up. or I guess you can't do a thumbs up in the chat. You can do just a yes or no. And I'll just go ahead and keep going. Cool. I like the ones for yes. That's nice and simple. Cool. All right. So yeah, we have our audio device out, which you chose, and I'll go ahead. The thing that's, this is relatively new, not super new, but relatively new in TouchDesigner is having the binding, which is really nice. I'll show you an example of how we link things up in the upcoming example. But the binding is really nice. The binding is the purple one here, which means that it's two-way. So you can see that when I change my audio, I don't want to use the fan, change my volume here, it's also going to be linked to this here. I can change it both places, which is really nice. I wasn't sure I liked the binding at first when TouchDesigner introduced it, but now I absolutely love it. So it's a really nice feature. Okay, so whenever we're importing audio, this is going to be, delete that, clean up, delete that one. Okay, so this is what you guys should see. So this is going to be your setup for importing audio. Technically, of course, if you wanted to clean up after the fact, you only need one of these, but I wanted to set something up so that when you guys open TouchDesigner to start a project, it's ready to go for you, whether you're doing an audio file or a device in. So you'd pick between those, switch it, and then it's ready to go. Okay. Down. All right, so once we have our audio coming in, then the next important thing that we need to do is analyze the audio. The first thing that we're going to do is walk through different techniques of how to analyze it. And then after that, we're going to talk about figuring out what parts you want to analyze and thinking more strategically about what technique to use to get specific elements that you want from the audio. So first, let's take a look at different ways to analyze the audio. So again, sorry if I go too fast. The analysis one is also I have the same issue with selecting audio and not seeing my actual audio outputs in the dropdown, but the same solution would resolve it if I switch to component levels. I'm impressing enough at the ability to route audio output needed to. Oh, welcome to TouchDesigner. Yeah, I apologize for those. I will definitely check into why the audio is not being carried up to the component top, and we'll check into that on the break. Okay, so we have, so this is a component nicely bundled up. This one, those of you guys that are new to TouchDesigner, I highly recommend when you start thinking about your network, which is, by the way, is an art form in itself. So one of the things about TouchDesigner is figuring out how to set up your network, and it's very specific to each person, how they organize it. And it's like your state of mind, but externally visualized within TouchDesigner. So how you organize your network, it can be done a million different ways, but it is an organizational art form for sure. So the base comps are, as I mentioned, basically containers for set processes. So this entire process is bringing in your audio source, and we have our out. So the out here is what adds this thing here. So just to show you an example, if I add another out just for fun, show you what happens. So we have our out two. It doesn't have anything going to it, but what happened is now I have this outgoing little network. It probably has a name. I don't know. I think Ben, I don't know if it's Ben from TouchDesigner that's in the thing. If you, there's a name for this little thing, I'm sure, but this little outgoing thingy is the technical term for it. Now that I've added the out, then I have this, And so that's why that one's there. And then I can drag it to there. So this would just pull out and then you can link it to something else. And the great thing about that, so now that we have our out, this is also a container, which is specifically for the analysis. So if you double click on it, you can see we have our in. We have our in, which is now pulling in that information from the other base. So we're just organizing it. Here's our information. Sole purpose of that is to bring in the audio, and then we're feeding that to this base, which is its sole purpose is to do the analysis. Connector class. So we have the connector class. Yes, that links to that. I'm wondering if this specific like little doohickey output thing has a name to it. Because right now we're just calling it connector output doohickey, which is not necessary for the workshop. That is a total digression. So we're going to take a look at, sorry, I keep accidentally double clicking. We're going to take a look at different ways to analyze the audio. There are 3 that we're going to basically take a look at. And these are, as I mentioned, basically ready-made tools where I've already put them together so that they're basically ready to go for you. And then you can just tweak them. And depending on what audio you bring in, you can change them based on what you want to pull out. So the first method that we're going to look at, if you go to this one here, is also a base. You can double click and go inside of it. Okay. And with this one, so we're pulling in our audio. And this is, if we change our audio input, this is of course going to update as well because everything is connected. Output connector. Yeah, it needs something better than that. I'm sure it's like a doohickey of sorts. It's got a name, I'm sure of it. If not, we should come up with one. All right, so then we have, we're pulling in our audio. And then what we're doing here with our math is, as you can see, so we have stereo. So we have a left and right because our signal for our audio is left and right. It's a stereo signal. And so what we're going to do with the math is we have a way of combining the channels. And so what we've done is just average them. So it basically takes the average of the 2 channels and combines it into one. And so that way, we don't have to worry about 2 different signals. We have one average signal, which reduces basically everything to, we can focus just on the one signal instead of the 2 of them. And if you guys have an audio background, this is going to look extremely familiar. And this should definitely resonate with something that feels very comfortable to you guys because you've worked with it, I'm sure, in audio before. So if you add an audio filter, which is basically just double click, and we have our audio filter, right? So that's all that these are, audio filter. The audio filter has different options. So we have, if you look under filter, we have our low pass, high pass, band pass, and band reject. And just for the folks who aren't from an audio background, so low pass means that basically you're allowing the signal below a set frequency to pass through. So anything above that set frequency, you're basically throwing out. It can't pass through. Okay, I'll read the comments about the outgoing doohickey in just a moment. So the different filter types. So we have the low pass and high. High pass is the exact opposite, where you set a frequency and it's going to allow through any frequencies above that specified frequency. Okay, so low pass lets through lower frequencies that you specified. High pass lets through high frequencies. And the band pass is basically you're selecting a region of that spectrum that you want to allow through. So what we've done here is with the audio filter, the first one, our goal is to isolate our low spectrum frequencies, our mid spectrum frequencies, and our high spectrum frequencies. So basically we're breaking it out into the classic low, mid, high, 3 different values that we're going to use to then map things later. So this is a very classic way of analyzing sound. So the first one we set to low pass. I've set my filter cutoff to 180, but that is of course variable. So you can click and slide it and you can change to a different frequency. Okay. Another thing, we've changed it from, by default, it's set to logarithmic. So I've changed it to frequency here. And by the way, in TouchDesigner, if you ever want to know what's been changed, this little circle here, you can click on that and it's going to show you only the parameters that you've changed, which is a really nice feature. Because sometimes you might not remember what you've changed about an operator. And then if you click on that, it'll show you exactly the things that you've changed. Okay. So we're doing that 3 times. So for this one, we've isolated our lows. For this one, we've done the exact same thing, but we've selected bandpass. And we've set our filter cutoff to 800. And for this one, we've set it to high pass and we've set it to 3,500. Okay? And that's going to then isolate our low, mids, and our highs. What we're doing here, this fun guy here. So this is our audio spectrum. And I mentioned earlier that we'd be working with FFT. So this is what the FFT does, is it takes the incoming audio and it breaks it out into the frequency domain. And so what we're actually seeing is the power for each frequency as the audio is coming through in real time. So this is basically what the FFT process is doing, is giving us this audio spectrum that we can then work with. Okay. And then through this, I mentioned, so for those of you guys that are new to TouchDesigner, we're just kind of doing an overview, so you don't have to recreate this whole thing. So then we've just renamed everything and we've combined them to visualize this process here. So we can see that we do have very clear lows, mids, and highs now. The highs are very subtle because my audio is turned down right now, but they are there. And then what that gives us is then a single variable value for our lows, mids, and highs. And I say variable because in the next example, we're going to be creating triggers. And so the difference between a variable value and a trigger is on or off. It's either yes or no, go or don't. And so the variable value is something that can be mapped that's going to continuously change over time, right? So if we look at an example of, we're going to kind of jump a little bit ahead, tease at the audio reactive part. Let's go to the end of our network here. So basically just scroll over and double click. And we're going to go to our tops. And let's go ahead and make a ever so exciting circle. And they are alphabetical. So if you're looking for a circle, it does go alphabetical. Okay, and we're going to click on that. And so the way that we map the audio to a parameter in TouchDesigner is actually really simple. So in this case, what we're going to do, let's go ahead and let's say that I wanted the size of the circle to be driven by our mids here, right, which are pretty low, but yeah, the radius is 0.4. So that should work pretty good. So what we're going to do is click on the plus sign and you'll see the border changes around that. Okay, so click on the plus sign. And then I'm going to click on my circle and you can see we have all of these parameters. So in TouchDesigner, every single operator has all these parameters that you can adjust that dictate what this parameter or what this operator is doing. So in this case, one of the parameters that we have for the circle is the radius. So if I want the audio level for my mids to control the radius, all that I have to do is once I've clicked on that plus sign, click and hold, and then I get this arrow, and then drag it over on top of the word radius. And then you can see it has a plus sign, and then let go. And once you do that, you're going to see this list. So we want to export chop. And I'll hold there because those that are new to TouchDesigner, that's a very key process to be able to do. So I'll do that one more time and hopefully everybody's got that part. Because that's in the very simplest of ways, that's the mapping of audio to a visual parameter. It's going to get more exciting, but that's the core of it. So again, I made sure that I click on my plus sign, right? So that it looks like this. I don't have my border. I'm going to click on this value here, our variable value. I'm going to drag it up on top of the word radius and let go and export chop. Okay. And the reason that I dragged it on top of the word radius and not the individual ones is because if I'll just turn that off for a second. If I only did one, then it would only control that value. So if I drag it on the word, then it does map it to both of those parameters under radius. Okay, so exciting, exciting. We now have our circle responding to our, what do we say, our mid values now, right? And of course, if we turn up the volume, then this value would be at higher, which would then affect, this would be a greater scale. Okay, so we're gonna branch out on this, but in a nutshell, that's the technical process of mapping a value to a parameter. Okay. So we have our lows, mids, and highs. I'm gonna back out. Oh, and I wanted to say, so this process here, those of you that are new, so there's a whole wealth of information in the TouchDesigner community. So this example here, there's actually a video, did I put it up here? Yeah, so this one here, Matthew Reagan, who's wonderful and has a lot of videos. If you want to check him out, I highly recommend him. He has a video that does this, a whole walkthrough on step-by-step setting up this network. So we did kind of a walkthrough of it, but if you want to check out his videos on, I put it here, THP 494, I think it's called, on the audio-visual section. He does a walkthrough of creating this basic setup here. And the next one that we're going to do, what am I getting? Oh, I can delete that one. That's why I'm getting the red. So the next example that we're going to look at, this is creating the variable values. So these are our changing values, right? They're continuously changing. The next example is setting up an audio trigger. So we're going to jump inside of this space here. Okay. And so in this one, again, we have the same audio coming in. So this is the same audio signal that we've been working with. We're pulling in using the in chop here. Okay. And this is a little bit different process that we're working with here. So we're using the same audio spectrum that we talked about before, which is going to visualize the sound here. But the thing that we're doing with this one is we're using the trim chop. And with this, we've changed it to absolute. And with this, we are literally going in and trimming the signal. And so we can hone in, I'll show you by changing these. So like if I change 200 to, let's put this at 0 and I'll do 200 here. So if I change the start and end value, you can see that now it's going from 0 to 200 is my frequency there, or my sample. Okay, so I can look at these, the way that the audio spectrum is moving. And if I wanted to hone in on specific frequencies, then I can break it out and use the trim chop to hone in on specific frequency bands that correspond to different instruments. So this is one way of doing that if you have one audio file that you need to try and isolate certain instruments within the audio file. Really quick, I wanted to say at this point, if you ever have access to the stems, whether you created the music yourself and you can isolate the different instruments if you're working with Ableton, or if you're working with a musician and you have access to the different stems with all the different instruments broken out as opposed to everything already combined into one audio file, then that is the absolute best way to work. Because what we're doing here with this process is we're taking something that's already been combined and we're separating it out to try and isolate specific characteristics in the audio that we can then map to certain features. So if you can have access to the file that literally has all the instruments already separated out for you, then what you can do is use the process that we talked about with the, if you have them as different audio files, then you can use the audio file in and then have each one of these be the separate instrument. and then you can treat them separately as opposed to having them all combined into one, which is really nice and makes it much easier to work instead of having to break them out. But if you do have them all combined, which is more than not probably the case, then you can also use this process. So what we're going to do, we'll go back to here and I'll put this back to 200. Right. So we can break out and isolate different characteristics of the sound. And then what we're doing is with the analyze. So what analyze does is it's analyzing this signal, but based on how we decide that we want it to be interpreted. So if you click on the analyze chop, so it's analyzing the signal, but if you can see here, this is several different samples that we're working with in this chop. In the analyze chop, we are working with one single value per sample. So as opposed to working with all these samples, we're converting it through the function that we choose to a singular value. So one value per sample. Under function, we can choose how we want to have this analyzed. So if we average it, that's obviously going to average the signal, which for audio is probably maybe not what we want to work with. If we do maximum, then that's going to be more like peak analysis. So you're getting the maximum of the signal as it's coming through. So that's going to be more like a, basically just giving you the value of the strongest power frequency per sample. And then I'll just focus on the ones that you're most commonly going to work with, because there's several, as you can see, that you would work with. So maximum or our RMS power, which is root mean squared power, is another common one. So if we choose root mean squared, basically what that's doing is it's a closer representation of human hearing. And so it's a similar way of processing this information and converting it to the representative value for that sound, but it's more catered towards how human hearing works, essentially. Oh, thank you for posting the link. Cool. And then, so from there, so this is how we're converting it to the signal. So we have our math, and essentially, so you can see, I changed the audio. So right now this is kind of, the audio changes a lot. So it's not like one consistent beat or anything. But we're using the logic chop, which is absolutely one of my favorites, because when you're doing anything in TouchDesigner, not just working with audio, but anything that you're doing that you want to create a trigger where something is on when it's within a certain range and off when it's out of that range, the logic chop is excellent for that. So basically what we've done is isolated, changed it to off when it's outside of current bounds. And then you can change the bounds based on essentially where the audio is at. And so if you look at the peaks, then it's going to, what are we at, 0.2 here? As I mentioned, this particular song that I changed it to keeps changing. But if we do 0.2, so if I change this to 0.2, which is going to lower it, then you can see now I'm getting more of a trigger type effect. So it's going to change between 0 and 1, and it's going to be more of a on-off trigger effect. Okay. And the way that that's different from the previous one, so as mentioned, the previous approach gave us variable continuous values that we could map to things like size or color, things like that. With the trigger, we're going to do another example, but show this works. So let's do, we'll do an easy example. So let's do, let's switch to top. So I just clicked on the purple, and let's go ahead and do a movie file in, movie file in. So again, it's alphabetical, right? So, oh, we have our banana, of course, classic banana. And I'm going to change the file to, what do we want to do? Let's do, sure, we'll do count. Why not? I want to do a movie and not an image, so we'll just do that one. All right, so so if we have our video coming in, we'll do something like a level, right? So let's say that we wanted to, every time that the kick hits, let's say that we wanted to add kind of like a strobing effect. Everybody loves the strobing effect. On the level, we have this invert parameter. So exact same that we did last time. If you remember, we click on the plus sign. And once we clicked on the plus sign, we don't have our border anymore. We can click on the kick and drag it over to invert and let go and export chop. So now we have that mapped, and hopefully the song will restart. Sounds like it just ended. I might need to restart in a second. But it's going to be from 0 to 1. So every time that that kick changes to 1, then we're going to get a, I'll just talk because I don't want to go up several levels and fast forward it. So it's going to convert it to a 1, which is going to invert our visuals. We're basically waiting on the song now. I might just fast forward it or switch songs. Please hold 1 second. So if we go in our audio source and we will just, let's see. Can I fast forward it? Oh, we know. Might need to turn up too. Okay, so if we go back to analysis, and we have a few kicks. So you can see when we get our kick, when it does kick in. I should have picked a very bass heavy song for this example. So you can see when it flips, then it's going to switch the invert to the exact opposite of it and create that effect. So just to illustrate the difference between a variable smooth signal that's continuously changing versus the on and off type effect. Okay, so that's those two. And the last one that I wanted to show you guys, because if you are working with TouchDesigner, as I mentioned, like it can be a bit of a steep learning curve when you're first starting out. And there are some tools that are in TouchDesigner. Oh, I should mention actually, sorry, this one, if you wanted to watch a more in-depth step-by-step of how to create this one, you can check out the Interactive and Immersive HQ. There's an audio example for setting up this one. So there's a whole wealth of information in the TouchDesigner community. I try to credit people for different tutorials that are easy access that you can go back and watch a more in-depth walkthrough of them. So we're kind of doing a little bit of a faster walkthrough. So with the tools that are ready-made in TouchDesigner, the way to get to this one, because this is, I didn't use it for a long time when I first came across it, because I'm a big fan of kind of like making my own tools and customizing stuff. But this does have a lot of stuff that you'll be working with. And so if you're first starting in, you're very welcome. If you're first starting in TouchDesigner, then this is a really good ready-made tool that lets you tweak some of the parameters to get exactly what you want from the sound. And so I'll show you how to, it's here if you want to just open the file. But if you go to dialogues and palette browser, and I wrote a note above here too if you lose it, and then you can go to tools. And if you ever are looking for some kind of like nice pre-made tools in TouchDesigner, if you open up the palette, then there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can explore in TouchDesigner that you can play around with that's kind of all ready to go and ready to start playing with. So if you go to tools and then audio analysis. So I'll drag this up. This, I think Ben's watching, by the way, I don't know if it's just me, this kind of gets buried under here as of recent versions of TouchDesigner. So maybe it's just me. I don't think I have the latest, but if you don't see your options coming up here, maybe it is just me, but it might be buried underneath this little pull-up thing here. And then you can go to audio analysis, and then you can just drag and drop that in. So again, I always recommend being curious and inspired to make your own tools. But if you want something that's just quick and ready to go, that has a lot of the same features that we've been looking at in the previous examples, then you can, I got a little pop-up. I don't know if there's a question. No. Then this is ready to go. So if we have this, then it's going to basically break out all the parameters that we've been working with. You have your low, mids, and highs that are visualized here. You can adjust your, sorry, we have to click on the plus sign. Keynote. Always click on the plus sign if you want to interact with the viewer. So we can adjust our threshold and adjust our gain. And so basically we're doing the same thing that we did in this version here. We're breaking out our lows, mids, and highs, but we just have a visual interface that's allowing us to access that information a little bit more cleanly. If you're curious about how this was set up, you can jump inside of it, and you can see this is essentially how it's set up. And this is why, again, I love TouchDesigner, is there's so many ways to basically set up your network and have the visual interface and have all these things come together. And then what you see on the front end is this, but behind it is all of this that's in the background. So if you're curious about how it's created, there's that. All right, so now that we've been looking at all these different ways to analyze the audio, which really is a very important part of it, because we're figuring out it's really how we get the data from the audio, because without having the data from the audio, you can't really do too much with it other than creatively interpreting it. And so once we have the information data broken out, now we can start to do stuff with it. All right, so let's see, how are we doing on time? Oh, it's 10:04. Okay, so before we start jumping into the visual part, you guys want to take a short break? And
Yeah,
hopefully, okay. And hopefully, I know this is like mostly looking at audio signals. So hopefully I didn't lose people with just looking at the audio signal part, because again, that whole process part is a very important step in it. And once you start to get to this part, then figuring out which process to take to really isolate different parts of the audio, it's important to see different ways that you can analyze it and pull those out. So we will take a short break, and then we'll start getting into the creative visualization part.